Hey fishing friend, my name is JC with Rad Reeling Fishing. In this video, I'm going to share with you 6 different ways to rig for catching sheepshead. Why is that important to know 6 different ways? Because you might go to a place and try one method, it's not working. You just keep switching until you catch sheepshead. Just because you see a guy on YouTube rigged up catching sheepshead with shrimp or crabs a particular way in a particular spot, you really need to know all these different methods, you guys, so that you can switch them up until you figure out what's working. Yeah, you can use the method depending on the conditions you're fishing in as well. Now, I always rig up with either 15-pound test to 25-pound test, monofilament or fluorocarbon leader, or mainline, okay? In this demonstration, I'm tying everything on with braids so that you can see it. But yeah, where you tie your hook on is going to want to be monofilament or braided fishing line. Now, you guys, this is going to be a really good video. Now, I have another video that shows you all the different sheepshead baits that you can fish with, what's legal and what isn't legal. I'll put a link in the description area to that video. I also have a video, you guys, where I showed underwater footage of what a shrimp looks like, a live shrimp when you hook him. That's a great one too. I'll put a link down in the description area for that. Then I got tons of sheepshead catching and fishing videos I'll put links to as well. You guys, this is going to be a really good video. You need to know all 6 of these methods, so let's get to it. So your first rig is going to be what's called a bottom sweeper jig. These are pretty expensive, guys, but my buddy over in Daytona swears that that's one of the most effective rigs that he's ever used for sheepshead fishing. The reason this is so effective is this jig is designed so that when it lands on the bottom, the hook actually stays facing up. And so you get a really good hookup ratio, but it makes your bait look more natural. Let me show you, if you were using this rig with a crab, okay, fiddler crab, mud crab, or mangrove crabs, the way that you would do that is you go up the back of the crab, you would go right up through the bottom, maybe come in, depending on the size of the crab, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and just barely bring that hook point through that crab like that. So when that bottom sweeper jig lands on the bottom, it causes the crab to be sticking straight up like that in a very defensive position, and his little legs will be moving down there. So a great way to hook your crabs with the bottom sweeper jigs. Now, I have a video, you guys, on a lot of different ways that you can hook shrimp. Excellent video, because I did live underwater footage. I'll put a link in the description area. Check that out. But if I was using a bottom sweeper jig with a shrimp, I would probably just hook the shrimp either through the tail here, and that way that shrimp would just be popping around down there with his tail hooked on the bottom sweeper jig. And then also the other alternative would be, shrimp have a little black spot. If you go right in front of the black spot, but you would do it from underneath, you would go in the legs, you'd be able to see where that black spot is, and you would just go straight through the shrimp and come straight out through the top of his head like that. And that would make that shrimp just sit up natural while that bottom sweeper jig is on the bottom with the hook facing up. So those are the 2 ways that I would hook shrimp with a bottom sweeper jig. Like I said, I put a link in the description area. You guys can go check that out. If you order these jigs, you're going to want to order them in a 1/8 size, or if you can get a number 1 size in this jig, and get several different weights in this jig as well, because you're going to vary the weight depending on what the current is where you're fishing. But remember, sheepshead are hanging around structure, so these are expensive, and you're going to lose them, but they are effective. The next method is going to be a double rig that I like to use when I'm fishing with sandfleas. Southwest Florida, we have really small sandfleas, so I've got a number 1 hook here. I might move down to like a number 4 hook when I'm fishing with sandfleas. It just depends on the size of the sandflea that I have. But generally for sheepshead, I like using a number 1 size owner hook, really sharp point hooks. But with a double rig, you're just going to run 1 hook up on the line about 12 inches. And then, guys, all I do is I tie this on like I'm tying my shoe with overhand knots. I go 1, 2, 3 overhand knots, nothing fancy, okay? So there's 1 rig, 1 hook, up about 12 inches. And then my next hook is going to be a little closer to the bottom. 1, 2, 3. These hooks can be spaced anywhere from 12 to 8 inches apart. And then you want to make sure that you have enough tag end down here on the bottom to tie a sinker on. Nothing fancy. I'm just going to tie my sinker on the same way. Same type of knots, just the overhand knots that I would tie my shoe on with. So there you go. You got the weight on the bottom. You've got your hook here and your hook here. The next method for catching sheepshead is just free lining your bait. No weight at all, okay? Like I said, this is going to be your monofilament or your fluorocarbon leader, and that can be attached to your braid with a swivel. So yeah, you're just going to free line, no weight at all. And this is going to depend on how much current that you have, and also the depth of the water that you're fishing and where those sheepshead at. I mean, if you're fishing in 30 feet deep water and you're free lining, it's going to take you forever to get that bait down there. So you might want to use the next method that I'm going to show you. But yeah, your free line is really good when you don't have a lot of current. The other day I was fishing around some pilings. I could see loads of sheepshead down there. The current was hardly moving, so I took the weight off, switched to a free line, and next thing you know, I got hooked up with a sheepshead. But yeah, and the same methods I showed you before, hooking on shrimp, crabs, sand fleas. I just basically hook sand fleas anywhere, guys. Yeah, wherever it can stick the hook on a sand flea. But yeah, with an oyster, you would just have to wrap that thing around, get it to stay on there. Barnacles, you'd have to just position it on the hook. But there's your free line rig, no weight at all. And yeah, no weight when you have no current or very little current. So the next method for rigging for sheepshead is just going to be adding a crimp weight to your free line. A crimp weight is a small split shot, and you basically just crimp it on there. I would crimp it on anywhere from like 8 inches up to about maybe 10 or 12 inches onto the line. You just put the line inside of the weight like that, and then just crimp it with a pair of pliers or with your teeth. And there you go. You got your hook here, and you could add just a little bit of weight on there because maybe you have just a little bit of current. It'll help hold your bait in position. This next method is what's called a knocker rig. You just need a weight depending on the current. When I fish down at the jetties, I'm usually using about a 1/4 ounce or a 1/2 ounce weight. You put the weight on your line first, then tie your hook on with a clench knot or a canoe man loop knot. And so what happens with the knocker rig, that weight slides right down on top of the hook. The other day I was fishing, I fished a free line for a while. I fished the crimp weight method, didn't catch anything. I put on the knocker rig and it got that shrimp right flat down on the bottom, really solid, and a sheepshead came over and just hovered right over the top of it and nabbed that shrimp. So I love fishing with a knocker rig. And it's very similar to fishing with this type of rig. It's very similar to fishing with a bottom sweeper jig. The only difference is the bottom sweeper jig, your hook is going to stay straight up. Now, one of the benefits to having a knocker rig is if you happen to get hung up on structure, okay, it's called a knocker rig because you can jerk your line and that weight will slide back and forth, and it gives you more leverage to get your hook unhooked off of structure. That's why I love the knocker rig. You can pull that back and that weight will actually knock against the hook and help you be able to get that unhung off a structure. But yeah, great way to rig for catching sheepshead right there, the knocker rig. So your next rig is your fish finder rig. You're basically going to just cut off about 12 inches of monofilament or fluorocarbon. Take your 12 inches. Next, you're going to connect your braided line or monofilament line, whatever you're using, with a swivel. But the first thing that you want to do is you want to slide your weight on your main line, then tie your swivel, and you got this little 12-inch piece that you cut off of your monofilament or your fluorocarbon. That goes on next. Some people call this a Carolina rig, but my buddy over in Daytona, he made a video about that. He said, this is not a Carolina rig. He says, this is called a fish finder rig. Carolina rigs are for bass fishing. We're not bass fishing. We are sheepshead fishing. So once you get your swivel tied on, you got your 12-inch piece of line, then you're just going to tie your hook. That right there, guys, is your fish finder rig. You got your weight above your swivel on the main line, your swivel, your 12-inch piece going down to your hook. Now this is a great rig as well, because if you get hung up on the structure again with this rig, you can jerk that weight back and forth and you have that leverage. It'll help get that hook unhooked off of whatever structure it is. Real quick, you guys, I just want to run through these rigs and just talk about them a little bit. The first one, the bottom sweeper, like I said, it's an expensive way to fish, but you really need to have some of those in your tackle box because it's such an effective way to catch sheepshead. Obviously, they are good for just always fishing on the bottom. Your free line rig, you guys, you're going to be using that when you have hardly any current, okay? Because sheepshead are always around structure and you want your bait to be able to just stay right in that area where the sheepshead are at. I love fishing free line because it helps present a bait more naturally naturally. The next one, you guys, where you put the crimp weight on there, obviously you're just going to use that when you need a little bit of weight to hold your bait down around that structure in that strike zone where those fish are at. The next one, I think, was the fish finder rig. Anyway, the fish finder rig, you got all these different rigs. Like I said, you're just going to switch up and figure out what works and use whatever rig for the conditions that you're fishing in. The fish finder rig is, and I mean, it's just a long-standing rig that everybody uses, so you got to know how to use that one. The knocker rig, like I said, I love that rig because it keeps that bait right flat down on the bottom. A lot of times that's where those sheepshead are at, and I like the knocker rig because I can just use it and it'll knock that hook off whenever it gets hung up. Okay, and then the double rig, you guys, I like using that for the sand fleas and smaller baits because you can actually, sheepshead just barely nibble something, and when you have a really small bait like a sand flea, they'll just come up, open their mouth, and close it. You won't even know they're on there. So with that double rig, because the weight is on the bottom and the hook is up higher, you'll be able to feel that bite a little bit better. And I like using the double rig for the sand fleas around here because our sand fleas, because we have red tide, are so super small. Anyway, you guys, yeah, you're just gonna use different size weights for the current and the depth of the water, the conditions that you're fishing in. And like I said, just keep switching them up until you figure out what is gonna actually work in the area that you're in. I'm gonna say this about the bottom sweeper jigs. I fished with those a few times and I really got hung up a lot, you guys. I lost a lot of jigs fishing around structure. They didn't work very well at the jetties. For some reason, the knocker rig works pretty darn good at the jetties. But anyway, like I said, you just switch it up depending on the conditions that you're fishing in. All right, thanks for watching this video. I will put links in the description area to other sheepshead videos about the bait and rigging shrimp and even just sheepshead catching videos if you want to watch some of those. Thanks for watching this video. Thumbs up are appreciated. Get out there and go fishing, man. Life is fun. Live it. See ya!